So today we're going to be looking through meta decks. We're going to go through the top 10 from Genetic Apex and also from the Mythical Islands. We've gone onto Limitless and we've gone through the tournaments and gone by win percentages to then see what the top 10 are. We've gone for 5 or the top 5 in the Genetic Apex decks and then also a top 5 in Mythical Islands. So let's have a look at them. So the first one coming up, as you can see, we've got all the information here. We've got the points and the specific users. It all bases itself around counts, how many battles they've done, and this is going to be the first one. Now, I don't think there's any surprise on this one, to be honest. Pikachu is a massive, massive deck. And as we see from the Genetic Apex, we've got the original sort of vibe going on. We've got the Pikachu EX, which is very standard. The Zapdos going with it as well. To be honest, I see this one, but it doesn't really get played that much. I think the Paralyzation is going to be fantastic if you do manage to get it off. But you know me, I'm not much of a coin flipper. Sometimes it's just a bit too risky, especially in a tournament. All of these decks have been played in tournaments as well, where people are obviously going for prizes. So trying to make sure that you actually get the most efficient deck that isn't based around potential getting 2 coins, 3 coins, or 4. It's going to be a big one, other than kind of like Celebi and Superior. That's kind of like a, yes, you've got to use the coin flip, but when you coin flip in 15 coins, you're kind of not necessarily going to lose on that one. You then obviously got the very original Blitzel and also Zebra Striker. Now, I love this one when it does kind of happen and you do manage to get it in, as being able to hit on the back burner there is always a very good move. The standard when it comes to the items, you've obviously got Sabrina for the switch for your opponents, Professor Research, Giovanni, Pokeball, X-Speed, and Potion. Very, very standard when it comes to it. I'm a big fan of this deck. I ran this deck for many, many days. Next up, we have a Pikachu and Raichu deck. By the looks of it, we're going Pikachu EX again. Going to be very similar. Instead, they've gone for the Raichu and the normal Pikachu instead of obviously Blitzel and Zebra Striker. We'll try and obviously make sure that there's a good balance between them. But to be fair, in the Genetic Apex, it was predominantly either Pika or Mewtwo. They were the 2 decks that really worked. We have thrown in a Lieutenant Surge in this one instead. So obviously move all energies from your bench Pokemon to either Raichu, Electrode, or Electabuzz in the active spot. So I could kind of see that as like a kind of almost like a Hail Mary right at the end to try and get Raichu in there, do the Thunderbolt to get the 140. It's going to be that last ditch attempt, which could work, and sometimes does catch you out on that one. So nothing too different, nothing too crazy different. Got the same 3 over here, and it is just a difference in Zebra Striker and Blitzel, to be honest. We then have a slightly different deck. We've got, by the looks of it, a Starmie and also Articuno, which is an interesting one. We've obviously thrown in a lot of hope on Misty potential. Can be a very good kind of starting hitter, to be honest. With obviously having Misty potentially giving you some extra energies, but to be fair, it has been dropped down on its sort of how it works. It definitely feels like they've patched it quite a lot. There was a lot of people getting 10, 20 different heads, and the odds on that is very, very slim. So now it's like 1 or 2 at a push, but Starmie is a fantastic one for early on combat. 2 energies, straight in on the 90, literally your second turn. If you get Star you in straight away, if obviously you are first on the turn or second on the first turn, you can obviously put the first energy on. If you've got Starmie in the back, the next turn you have, you can start dealing 90s. That's going to be very, very hard to beat, especially on EX. 90 won't necessarily KO in 1, but you get 2 hits on a Mewtwo, you're pretty much done for, so you do have to battle against it very, very cautiously. Articuno obviously being quite a big one. I think if you do manage to get to the Blizzard, the 10 damage on each of the bench, it's a very hard Pokemon to get out at 140. It's going to take a Mewtwo, a Pika, or for instance a Celebi later on to be able to do that. And then you've got the final Articuno with Ice Beam. Obviously you can go for the Paralyzation again, or make your opponents paralyzed. Don't know, Paralyzation, is that a word? It's going to be a word now. And then every other Pokemon, every other item is pretty much the same. See a red card every now and then. It's kind of one of them ones that if you get an extra, you kind of throw it in, really. Now, I'm unsure if this one is going into the Mythical Island, because Greninja, I'm pretty sure, wasn't very good prior. But it must be, yeah. So I think I want to say this was the Mythical Island with Greninja, because it's an incredible ability. It basically merged itself really, really well with pretty much every water type. You could even throw it into any deck if you want. If you've got, say, I mean, you're going to have something that's like a single attacker, because you don't actually need any energy on it. You've got to take the risk, because obviously you do kind of want some water, but the first two evolutions don't obviously need any, they're colorless energies. Then you just need one water for Greninja as well. Articuno being thrown into that, so powering up Articuno, still having the health, you'll obviously throw in them two. Trying to power Greninja up on the back to be able to use its ability to hit that 20 damage on anybody. It's a very, very good ability to knock something out before it gets there. If they're trying to power up a Charizard, a Blastoise, a Venusaur, even if they're trying to go a Gyarados at the back, being able to just knock it off kind of a little bit at a time, even if it takes 2 or 3 turns, once it comes in, if you can then knock out a good 80, you might be close enough to knock it out. And then obviously you could put Greninja in the title spot, and it does do 80 if you do both on the same one, if you do it on their active Pokemon. So a very good deck. Again, everything's similar. Misty, little red card. Obviously, Pokeball and Professor's Research are pretty as standard in every deck you're going to find. Now, I must admit, I haven't really seen that many Electrodes, but I can assume... Oh, they've not even put a Lieutenant Surge in this. So we've got the Pikachu and the Zapdos, standard. We knew that was going to happen. We've got a Voltorb Electrode, 2 energies. Obviously not an EX, which is good. It only takes 1 point. 70 for it as well. So very much like Starmie. On the second turn, if you're second to go first, whack the first energy on, then Electrode in the next turn, and then the second energy. You can start doing 17 straight away. Now, obviously, everybody's going to kind of choose the Pikachu for that, because it is the same deal. But if you do get the bench in as well, you're obviously doing 90 on a normal, and then 110 on anything that's weak to it, and then throw a Giovanni on top, you're doing 120 straight on that hit, which is always nice, or 100 if you're just going against a Mewtwo or something. So very, very good deck nonetheless. We have got a Electabuzz as well, so I suppose they haven't necessarily got more spots for it. You've only got 1 Giovanni, everything else is 2. So unless like you give up maybe a Sabrina and kind of add a Lieutenant Surge, or you add an extra Giovanni, it works. Obviously with Thunder Punch, you've got Flip a Coin. If it's heads, does 40 more damage. If tails, it also takes 20 damage to itself. So it's one of them that it's a risky one. I don't really see too many of it. It'd just be another one to add on to Pikachu as a bench Pokemon, more so than anything. But it's a solid deck. I think Pikachu would still be predominantly the hitter in this one, or Zapdos itself, really. We then throw ourselves into Mythical Island. We've done the top 5 there. In terms of win percentages, most definitely, you've got the Executor and also Celebi. This is one of the best decks. You could probably even throw out this Executor and maybe even just go for 1 each of these, and then just kind of just have 1 with a Tropical Swing. But I think for me, even just going the Cyperia and then Celebi EX, it's one of the most consistent decks I've come across if you can get it right. Obviously, like you've ever done with any of the free tier evolutions, trying to make sure you get into Cyperia is very difficult in itself, but Celebi's always a nice one anyway, because if they've not set themselves up properly, you could potentially get all the way up there very, very quickly. You get 2 energies, you could possibly hit 100, you then add another one, 150. Soon as Cyperia comes in then, you're already doing pretty good damage. So I normally go straight out with the double Celebi, but you can obviously go with the Executor first and then build up the Celebi on the bench. Tropical Swing, obviously if it does heads, it can do an 80 off 1 energy. You mean literally on the second, if you're second, like we said on the first turn, you get 1 onto the Execute. I can never say that name. Executor. We're going to go with that one. Second turn, you can get him in. You got the 1 energy. The second one goes on Celebi. You can just then power Celebi up by potentially still doing 80. Yes, you get the -2 if he does go out, but realistically, as long as that keeps going at 160 HP, it's still very difficult to get out. You manage to keep its health all the way until Mewtwo's done in. You can take at least 1 hit without a Giovanni, which is always nice. We'll then see a bit of Leaf going on. Obviously, with with a supporter card, being able to bring a Pokemon out with a 2 energy retreat. And then you've got Erica as well, throwing its hand in with the grass Pokemon, obviously for healing 50. It's always nice, and this is why we don't have any potions. It frees up a little bit more item space, is what you'll see with a lot of these grass decks. Now, another deck that is most definitely featured quite a lot, it is the Gyarados Greninja deck. We've even got a bit of Drudigon in here as well. It's a very, very good deck. Basically how this one works, if you've never seen it, Drudigon goes up front. You normally have one on the bench. You'd have a Magikarp on the bench and a Froakie at the minimum. You don't necessarily need a double Drudigon, but if you can kind of work it that way, works really well. You're powering up Magikarp to then get to Gyarados. You then throwing in a Froakie to try and get to Greninja for obviously the Water Shuriken, and Drudigon's basically being the tank. You could throw in 2 Drudigons in that. Now, naturally, if you do get the Mewtwo opposition or a Celebi that does the hits, hopefully you have got to the 4 energies with Gyarados first, and then obviously if you've got to Greninja, you're doing 20s every now and then. You're not necessarily powering up Drudigon, but it has got that rough skin ability, so if anybody hits it, which they likely will try not to unless they're whacking it in 1, it is going to do 20 damage to the opponent as well, even without doing a hit. It's a very, very tanky build, and obviously Drudigon's going to feature in quite a lot of these, or at least that's what I've seen kind of playing in the Mythical Islands, because it's just a very, very hard deck to go against. It really does power up quite nicely, and if you can get the Magikarp in first, then you get the Greninja, the Drudigon's already there, it becomes very difficult to budge. Then we have a deck that personally I need to get a little bit more use in, to be honest. We have the Aerodactyl and Primeape. We've got a bit of Marshadow that I've seen quite a lot of, and a Hitmonlee. Now obviously Hitmonlee, this attack does 30 damage to one of your opponent's bench Pokemon, so it's not going to take the active, but it can be quite good to just start doing damage if they're trying to build up a Magikarp, if they're trying to build something up. Normally they're only going for the 1 tier, so if you can manage to get 2 hits before they evolve it, that's going to be a pretty good attack, to be honest. The only thing is if obviously they get the Starmie on the second turn, it will wipe Hitmonlee out straight away. Primeape throwing himself in. It's not necessarily the best Primeape in my opinion. I do like the other one, but it does require damage to already be on there. So likely chance is he's going to be 1 hit away anyway. So you only get 1 hit of 100. We have then the Aerodactyl with his obvious ability. Your opponent can't play can't evolve any Pokemon in their active spot. So if they are trying to get that final one, they've got Charmeleon in, then they can't put Charizard until it's on the bench, which is pretty good to then have to delay it a turn if you do manage to get it. And it's only a 2 energy, again, to get that Land Crush for the 80. Marshadow is almost that backup as well, which is always nice. He'll do 60 extra damage. If, say, they take Hitmonlee out, you manage to get the 2 energies on Marshadow, bring him in, whack 100 straight down. It's always a nice kind of bank to go on. So it's kind of a good plan to maybe have the Hitmonlee to try and obviously attack their bench. Then obviously if he does get KO'd, you throw the Marshadow in with the 2 energies. You then obviously do the 100, swap it back out to a Mankey, do the exact same, and then you throw in the Aerodactyl to finish. And it's going to be a decent battle to try and do that with. It's obvious got its weaknesses, with obviously being Psychic, so Mewtwo is going to run amok on it, and that's just an unfortunate event, but you will find that it will do a lot of damage to quite a lot of decks that are not throwing in that Psychic. Now for the penultimate deck, we've got the Aerodactyl and a Farfetch'd. It's always an interesting one. The big thing for Farfetch'd, very low HP, but 40 on 1 energy on a straightaway go. Like I said with even the Marshadow, you could then use 4 energies, so 4 turns from the first turn. You could then get the Leak Slap on obviously Farfetch'd, whack it straight on, get the 40s done. You then throw in a Marshadow after to do the 100 damage. You then go back to a Farfetch'd after you've done the 100. You could then whack another 40, keep going, throw a Marshadow to do another 100, and then again, throw in either the Marshadow again or go to the Aerodactyl that you've been paying up. And realistically, that would only cost you 6 energies in its entirety to be able to do all of that. You've got 2 on the 2 Farfetch'd, 2 on obviously the Aerodactyl, and 2 on the Marshadow. It's not necessarily that difficult to get to that point, to be honest. So it's another deck that, done and used right, it could really do some damage against some people that just go for the ultimate hitters, the Celebis, the Mewtwo's, the Pikas. It has its moments, to be honest. And obviously with Farfetch'd, it's not going to be weak to Mewtwo, but Mewtwo will absolutely have its pants down eventually. And then the final deck, we've got an Executor, Celebi, and also a bit of Mew. Now, this is a little bit different because normally when it comes to grass decks, we have got the Cyperia that tends to be normally goes hand in hand, which is fair enough because obviously with this, it's predominantly based around obviously having the hacking from Mew. It's always going to be quite a nice one in any deck. It is colorless, so you can work it up in the background. We then also have the Tropical Swing, which is going to be great for the Executor from the gate. You've obviously got Stomp from Executor's normal version. If it's head, it does 30 more damage. Very much like the Tropical Swing, but doesn't take two of your points away. So you could be doing 60 damage again every heads, or obviously 80 if you've got the EX. Throwing in the Celebi at the end, trying to get all of the energies on it, because this only takes one, regardless of the version. And if you don't get the Celebi, you could start powering up the Mew to get the hack in. You could even just stop at the 3, and then once you've got to the Celebi, start doing that one as well. The only thing you've got to watch when having too many EXs in is where you power up first. Because obviously there you can only lose 2 EXs or 1 EX and a normal, or then you could lose, for instance, 2 of these Executor and then go to a Celebi or a normal Executor or a Mew. So it's always an interesting deck to see. But so far, in terms of win percentages, they are the best 10 decks from both expansions, 5 on each. Let me know if you run any of them. Is there any others that you'd like me to try out? We're going to start building some decks in the next few days and we'll start working some. And I think the first one I must go to is got to be that Aerodactyl deck. I'm very interested to see how that works. Make sure you subscribe though, and I catch you all for the next one. Peace.